Good afternoon. I'm going to call the Tax Committee to order, and we're going to call up Representative Atkins. So, Representative Atkins, we don't have a quorum yet, so we can't formally move your bill, but we can hear it, and when we have a quorum, we'll move it. So, and we appreciate everybody with the delay here. We had a caucus, so here we are. We'll do what we can until 2, and then we'll come back tonight. Representative Atkins, welcome.
And thank you, Madam Chair and members. As you've probably heard 1,000 times, Madam Chair, this is just a simple bill. But it really is. Right now we have the rental car tax that comes into the state of Minnesota. It is not dedicated to tourism, even though it's ostensibly used for tourism. This would dedicate it to tourism. That's the simple piece of that. I have several testifiers, not several, but I got 3, who will do a very good job of explaining why. But the 2 important pieces that I'd like to make are, number one, the return on investment when you dedicate this money is $8 for every dollar spent. That's $8 coming in the door in terms of new revenue for the state. I wish, Madam Chair, that there was such a thing as a dynamic fiscal note where we could put the dollar in and immediately see it come right back into your coffers. But that's an important piece. And then the second piece is that the challenge with not knowing for sure that the money is coming, particularly when you're building a marketing campaign over the course of a number of years, is that you don't know where your dollars are coming from, and you don't know for sure that they're going to come in. So when you're able to strategically plan and know that you've got this revenue stream that's coming, it allows you to do some much more cogent and thoughtful approaches to marketing. With that, Madam Chair, I'd reserve just a couple seconds at the end, but I'll turn it over to some really top-notch testifiers.
Okay, thank you, Representative Atkins. We appreciate it. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Atkins, committee members. Pleasure to join you on a beautiful spring day here in St. Paul. Also, hello to Representative Simonson. Tallship's Duluth is going to be huge this year, so we're from the same community. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm hoping for just a few moments of your undivided attention this afternoon, as this bill, House File number 712, is very, very critical to the future of our industry. Dedicating the car rental tax is a great way for everyone to do better. This isn't just about addressing the current need for Minnesota to be more competitive by increasing the promotional investment. We've been discussing that throughout the session. This is about maximizing return on investment. It's about more effective long-range promotional strategy and purchasing power. Acknowledging comparative metrics that point to success. It's about generating additional state revenues. It's about creating more jobs. It's about putting Minnesota and all Minnesotans ahead. In my time at the Capitol this session, there seems to be sincere, widespread, bipartisan support for significantly increasing our state's promotional investment. And in my opinion, dedicating the car rental tax is absolutely the very best way to do that. We're discussing a major revenue generator when we're talking about statewide tourism. We're talking about more revenues for state government, local governments, and private businesses. Businesses both small and large. Let's face it, there are very limited ways for state government to make more money. This is an opportunity that will benefit all state programs across the board by increasing revenues. Allow me to explain. For every $1 invested in Explore Minnesota tourism advertising, $8 in state and local taxes are returned. That's an 8-to-1 ROI. Minnesota tourism desperately needs a consistent, predictable funding model, which is more in step with today's world. We need to be more competitive and operate in a more strategic manner. To be anything less is not nearly as effective in today's competitive economy. I'm very passionate about dedicating the car rental tax because I know it will work. Also, please consider that tourism is already a $12 billion a year industry in Minnesota. Tourism employs 240,000 Minnesotans. Tourism brings home $769 million in state sales tax revenues. That's 17% of the state's total sales tax revenues. In the period 2003 to 2011, leisure and hospitality-related sales tax revenue grew 41%. Compare that 41% to 16% for other economic sectors in the state. A dedicated funding mechanism represents our greatest potential for success, hands down. We're doing business in a new economy. Let's make Minnesota all it can possibly be. We need this committee's support. I'm asking for all of your support. You see, we currently rank 30th as a state in promotional investment. You can see how we're killing the golden goose, being stuck at a 1990 funding level. You see, we need to have a performance-based mechanism like other states which recognize the potential in generating more revenues. The state of Michigan invests $27 million or more each year. Other nearby states continually take visitor dollars away from us with increased investment. States like Wisconsin, South Dakota, Illinois, and Montana all invest sizably more. Help us make Minnesota be more competitive. We have great products, we have a great infrastructure, we have great natural resources. But in order to flourish, we need to nurture all of these. Tourism is fueled by promotion. Tourism is critical to Minnesota's economy. Without additional promotional investment, this new economy simply is not sustainable. This dedication will deliver the following and more to come. Based on the commensurate $7 million budget increase, approximately $590 million in increased traveler spending, 7,100 additional jobs, $150 million more in income, and $56 million in state and local tax revenues. That's all new. Madam Chair and committee members, these impacts would benefit businesses and communities across the entire state of Minnesota. Explore Minnesota Tourism does a great job, but it needs more fuel, and it needs it from a dedicated mechanism. This dedication will be used to increase promotion in new markets outside of the state of Minnesota. It will bring in new visitors. It will create additional tax revenues for non-related programs. It will not only boost tourism, but open doors for other economic sectors. Please, from the bottom of my heart, seriously consider this bill. Let's make Minnesota more competitive. Let's create more jobs. Let's create more revenues. Let's dedicate the motor vehicle tax on car rentals to Explore Minnesota. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for your testimony. Representative Atkins, we're going to pause for 1 second. Representative Simonson, would you be willing to move House File 712 for possible inclusion in the omnibus tax bill?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Okay, so thank you for that. And Representative Simonson, there is a A130364 amendment. Did you want that, Representative Atkins? Yes, author's amendment. Would you move that, Representative Simonson?
I would also move the 0364 author's amendment.
Okay, so the amendment is before us. Questions? All those in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Motion carried. The amendment is adopted. Please welcome to the committee.
Well, thank you, and again, thank you for your time today, Madam Chair and fellow committee members. My name is Doug Killian. I'm the Senior Tourism Director of International Tourism at Mall of America. As Terry mentioned, the tourism industry in the state is it's a $12 billion industry. It's a very important tax generator for the state, employing 240,000 people. I have the privilege of working very closely with Explore Minnesota Tourism, and I can tell you that they are an excellent group of tourism officials. They are recognized by their peers with other tourism offices, and they do great work. But they need more money. We do studies at Mall of America, and obviously tourism is big there. For every $1 spent at Mall of America, a tourist, defined as someone outside the 150-mile radius, or come from the outside the 150-mile radius, spends on average at least $3 more in Minnesota's economy on lodging, dining, professional sports, museums, theaters, car rental. So it's a great tax generator. As Terry mentioned, we've seen how other states are really bombarding Minnesota, especially the Twin Cities, with their tourism advertising, Wisconsin, Montana, North Dakota. In fact, Wisconsin Dells has a tourism budget of $10 million, which is more than the entire state of Minnesota. On a national level, there's a real focus on tourism. The U.S. Commerce Department last year created a national tourism strategy. There have been tremendous strides made in the last year in streamlining visa applications for Chinese, Brazilian, and visitors from India. So there's a new company, there's a new organization called Brand USA that was created by the U.S. Travel Promotion Act 2 years ago to finally start rebuilding lost market share to other countries. So there's a real focus nationally, too, on on international tourism and tourism in general, which is very exciting. But Brand USA, in order to unleash these dollars for states like Minnesota, needs matching dollars. And right now, Explore Minnesota Tourism simply does not have the funds in order to take advantage of Brand USA and these international opportunities. And entities like Mall of America would love to partner with EMT and Brand USA on those initiatives. And just also, as I mentioned earlier, in order to get the best marketing opportunities, cost breaks with advertising, be it print, digital, e-commerce, you have to pre-plan a lot of these buys. At Mall of America, in our marketing department, we plan up to a year in advance advertising buys and different opportunities. So having a known and dedicated funding source for Explore Minnesota Tourism is really critical to taking advantage of these opportunities and competing so successfully with other states, as we know we can. So in closing, we just want to thank you for your interest in this. It's a dynamic industry. It's growing. And we want to take full advantage to really promote tourism in Minnesota and increase and expand the overall state economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. My name is Mark Runai. I'm the general manager up at Grandview Lodge, just north of Brainerd in Nisswa, Minnesota. I've been there for 34 years. And during that time, I have seen the private investment in the tourism infrastructure in Minnesota invest tremendously. Private investment just in our area is well over $100 million in my time frame of being there. And we are uniquely positioned at this time to take advantage of some cooperative and collective increase in our marketing expenditures from the state of Minnesota. I also have the privilege of sitting on the governor's tourism committee. This is a committee of industry people who help advise the Office of or the Explore Minnesota Tourism. And I can tell you, they are professionals. They know what they're doing. They spend their money very effectively and very efficiently, and they sweat the details on this to make sure that those dollars are guarded preciously and they're spent wisely. We know that we generate in our area numerous inquiries and leads that come about because of our combined efforts, things that we can't do alone. We're just not big enough to do it alone. The world of tourism marketing is extremely competitive. It changes every day. We all need the expertise that they bring to the table. I would encourage you to strongly consider this bill, to pass this bill. This permanent funding source, an increase in funding. This organization will spend this money wisely. This is a jobs program. This will create jobs. This will create tax revenue, sales tax revenue for the state of Minnesota. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for your testimony. Representative Atkins, did you have other testifiers?
Madam Chair, that concludes. I mean, literally, we could have scores of folks that would like to testify. We saw the agenda that you have, Madam Chair, and thought the better of it. The one item that I wanted to emphasize, though, before we conclude and lay this bill over, is that sometimes we talk about early education, for example, as for every dollar you put in, you get about a $15 return. And I support that, and I think it's a great idea. It's $15, though, that return comes in over many, many years. And in spite of that, I still support it. I think it's a great idea. This is for every $1 you put in, you've got an $8 return that comes almost immediately in terms of local and state sales tax dollars and other tax dollars that come into the state. That, if we can emphasize a single point, Madam Chair, it's a critical point to be made. This helps our budgets in the future. Unlike just about anything else we do, when we invest in tourism, we see an almost immediate return to the state in terms of new tax dollars at a state and local level. And I know that's kind of important to this committee, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Atkins. And Ms. Dalton, I'm going to ask you, we understand there is an error on the summary now that the amendment's been added. Ms. Dalton, can you clarify for the committee?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, it's just the amendment was really a technical correction that MMB requested to make it clear that all of the 6.2% extra sales tax on short-term motor vehicles was going into the Explore Minnesota Tourism Fund, and then that would be the sole source of general fund money that could go to Explore Minnesota Tourism. That is more than they are currently getting out of the general fund right now, however.
Is everyone clear on that? So, okay. Questions? First, I'm going to ask, is there anyone else who'd like to testify for or against this bill? Okay. Representative Myra.
Madam Chair, Representative Atkins, I've got a couple questions. In looking at both the House Research Bill summary and at the revenue note, it talks about rental. But when I look at the bill language on 2.8, it talks about revenues derived from the taxes imposed on the lease or rental of motor vehicles. Can you clarify what that is? If leases are supposed to be in there, or was that part of the amendment that I missed?
Representative Atkins.
Madam Chair, Representative Myra, and I'll look to Ms. Dalton, what we're trying to do is literally dedicate everything that's currently going and is talked about going to tourism, but is not technically going, is not truly dedicated. We're asking that be dedicated, and I believe that's a portion of that, but I'll look to Ms. Dalton to perhaps clarify.
Ms. Dalton.
Madam Chair, Representative, there is a definition in the law right now that refers to short-term motor vehicle rental leases that are taxable under this, that are subject to this 6.2% tax in addition to the 6.875%. This does not apply to long-term leases at all. And that's what's being dedicated here.
Representative Myra.
Madam Chair, Representative Atkins, so if I understand this correctly, the revenues are already going to Explore Minnesota, and we're just trying to make it more clear?
Representative Atkins.
Madam Chair, Representative Myra, we talk about these revenues going towards tourism, but they're not truly dedicated. By law, they're not at this point dedicated towards tourism, but we kind of talk about the rental car tax. The governor's talked about it in his budget.
Okay.
What this does is actually formally dedicate those funds that come in from those sources.
Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it.
You bet.
Thank you. Representative Loeffler.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And I think there's kind of an underlying assumption here that the people who rent cars are people from outside our state, and we're kind of exporting costs to the people who would benefit and respond to the tourism appeal. And I just want to say that I know in my community, and I had heard from one rental agency that the majority of their rentals were actually to people who live in the area. My neighborhoods are 20 to 25% households who don't own one single car in the household, and yet they often rent a car when they need to go visit people who, whether or go on vacation or whatever, or when their used car breaks down. And so I think we really need to think as we weigh this one, whether this is what percent of it is being paid by Minnesotans and what this would do in terms of the pressure to increase those costs, because those typically are low-income households. So I have nothing against tourism. I think it's wonderful. I think we ought to be doing more to promote our wonderful state and what it has to offer to people who haven't yet had a chance to discover us. But I am concerned that might actually create future pressure to increase this because of the testimony we just heard about unmet needs, and those will continue, I'm sure, to grow.
And Madam Chair, just briefly to that point, I wouldn't disagree with you that there are Minnesotans who rent cars as well. We can get additional information of the majority of the money does come from non-residents of Minnesota, and we'd be happy to supply the committee with that information.
Thank you. Okay, Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, I share some of the concerns that Representative Loeffler has expressed, because we've actually seen studies where it's well over 50% of these revenues are coming from actually Minnesota residents. And I know that Representative Atkins and I have had a little disagreement on that. But I'm wondering, if I understand the revenue note here, what we're looking to do is that this fund then would get, what, $6.4 million more in fiscal year 2014 than what they're currently getting from the general fund. Is that correct? And then 7.1 and so forth. Is that correct, Ms. Dalton? Am I reading this correctly, that we're adding $6.4 million to tourism than what they're currently getting? Is that correct?
Ms. Dalton.
Representative Lenczewski, Representative Anderson, that is correct, that the tax raises $15 million compared to the current tourism appropriation of only $8.7 million.
Okay. And Madam Chair and Ms. Dalton, I'm wondering, do you know, and I know this is probably outside of your scope, but do you know how much of that revenue comes from the state in the vehicles that we rent as a state because a lot of our we do a lot of vehicle rentals as a state entity, and wondering how much of that is local entities as well, do you know?
Madam Chair, Representative Anderson, I'm guessing it's actually fairly small that comes from the state because, as I said, this only applies to short-term rentals, which is defined as 28 days or less. Anything that's longer than 28 days is not subject to this tax, this extra tax.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Representative Simonson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my question, well, my first question at least, might be back to Mr. Mattson, but I'm not sure. But I thought I heard him make a reference that funding levels, and I'm assuming appropriation level from the state, was somewhere around the levels of 1990, and I just wondered if we could get some clarification on that.
Please.
Madam Chair, Representative Simonson, the current funding level of 8387, wherever it is in that category, is at a 1990 funding level. In fact, it goes back really to the early 1980s, and as we've seen more pressure, we've continued to slide and fall backwards, and that makes us very uncompetitive in the big scheme of things. So yes, we're at a 1990 funding level. The average throughout the United States of America for a state tourism office is $14 million. Some of our closest competitors in the competitive set, the nearby states, have excess of $27 million in their budget, which makes it very difficult not only to attract the new visitors that I spoke to earlier, it makes us puts us in an extremely difficult situation even to retain resident travel, which isn't the purpose of this increase or dedication, but it's getting harder and harder as other states have more sooner than later recognized the value of spending money to make money.
Representative Simonson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My second question might be for staff, but I'm curious as to the history of this 6.2% tax that we're talking about, why and where it came from and why it came to be. And when?
Ms. Dalton, and while you're on that, can you tell us if this is the same proposal as the governor's budget?
Madam Chair, Representative Simonson, I could attempt to answer that question. Also, John Edmond, the Director of Explore Minnesota Tourism, is here in the audience if you prefer to call him up. But the dollar values, and there's a few different proposals out there in terms of proposed legislation. The dollar value is similar to what the governor has proposed. He has proposed utilizing the car rental tax as one of the mechanisms. However, the dedication is not part of his plan specifically.
All right, thank you.
Madam Chair, could I add?
Yes, well, I didn't mean to trump your question there, Representative Simonson. I'm sorry, but please.
Well, just one quick follow-up to that is the original 6.2% tax was dedicated to tourism in the early 90s when we had the Super Bowl here and the NCAA Final Four and the International Special Olympics. It was dedicated to bring visitors to this wonderful area and have them enjoy it, which worked beautifully, and then the money reverted to the general fund. So that the original intent and purpose was for the tourism industry.
Ms. Dalton, now, was that ever formally dedicated? So maybe you want to start from the beginning with Representative Simonson.
Madam Chair, Representative Simonson, originally the tax was not a 6.2% tax. It was originally a $7.50 tax on every car rental, regardless of how long the car rental was. The tax was imposed at about the same time as we hosted the Super Bowl and these other sports. But at least my recollection is, and I will actually defer to Joel if he disagrees with me, but my recollection, it was never specifically dedicated statutorily. I think that there was probably a general fund appropriation that roughly matched it, but I'm not sure that there was ever a specific dedication of the amount. Then several years later, the $7.50 tax was changed to a 6.2% tax because there was some, particularly some people who rented very short-term locally felt that they were really being penalized by that $7.50 tax, and that was the revenue estimate at the time when we moved from the $7.50 to the 6.2% was to make it revenue neutral. But this way, the tax fell less on people who were renting locally on a short-term basis for like car repairs and things like this, and tended to fall more heavily on the tourism-type car rentals.
Ms. Dalton, can I just ask, do you recall Governor Valenti's proposal with this tax? Wasn't it dedicated, it's supposed to be dedicated to transit? Didn't become law. Do you remember that one? This tax is thought of by lots of governors, is my observation.
Madam Chair, I'm not sure that I actually remember that.
Representative Davids, do you know what Governor Valenti wanted to do with this tax?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't recall that, but if I do recall, when this was put on for the Super Bowl, it was put on as a temporary tax, I believe.
I don't know. Ms. Dalton, is it temporary?
Madam Chair, Representative Davids, I don't believe it was ever a temporary tax.
Okay.
And mainly, I think it's because at the same time, and I think this is where it starts to get linked, is that we were also not having a really great budget situation at the same time. So this was just another revenue source that was available.
Okay.
Representative Atkins, closing thoughts, or is there anyone else? Representative Simonson, did you have more? And I think, Representative Atkins, your points are well taken, and we think Explore Minnesota Tourism does a great job. You know this committee, bipartisanly, not everybody, but a lot of people don't really like dedications as a rule. But I think we hear what you're saying here. So Representative Atkins, further comments?
The only thing I'd add in addition to the ROI, Madam Chair, is just if there was some amount that the that EMT and the tourism folks knew was coming, and that's why the dedication is important as well. Even if it's not the full dedication, if it was some piece of that they knew was going to be there on an ongoing basis, it just allows you to be much more strategic in your marketing and in your planning.
Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, I apologize, Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Atkins, one of the things that often gets asked in this committee, and I know it had quite a bit last year, and that is, how are you going to pay for this? This is going to cost the general fund, and I know we had people out trying to get our attention in front of the House chambers today about $150 million cut to HHS, and I don't know if it's coming from there or if you're going to raise taxes or how you plan to pay for this.
Representative Atkins.
Madam Chair, Representative Drazkowski, it's a proposal to be considered, and I appreciate your consideration. It's already obviously a tax that's coming in, and that many are already in their minds dedicating to tourism. All this does is just formalize that effort, and even if it can't be the full figure, it could be a portion thereof that, again, as I mentioned to the chair, that the Explore Minnesota folks know is coming in, that they can then make some strategic and thoughtful long-term decisions for it. That's the main impetus for the bill.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Atkins. I didn't know that when people paid their tax, they were thinking, whoopee, this is going to tourism. I'm excited about paying it. I think they basically just pay the bill and say, I guess I'm out another $10.
No, I've actually been at rental car counters, Representative Drazkowski. Most of them do say whoopee. I've rented a lot of cars. It's a common reaction.
Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have the advantage of sitting next to Ms. Dalton here, so I've been kind of asking her some questions. But I wanted to see if she could give us some idea of what the total is that in public funding that is going to advertising for tourism across the state, because we have a lot of local lodging taxes. I have one in my community that's part of it is dedicated to the Convention and Visitors Bureau for this very purpose. So I wonder if she or Joel could give us the total or something, at least how does that compare to what's in front of us here in this revenue estimate? Because this certainly is not the total.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, what Representative Liebling and I were discussing is the fact that under Chapter 469.19, there is locals may impose up to a 3% lodging tax. 95% of that revenue must go essentially to fund tourism and Convention Bureau marketing and things like that. I'm not sure we actually have a dollar amount for that. because it's collected locally.
Yeah,
But there's 130 of them statewide.
Representative Liebling, and I think that 130 represents probably 75% of the population, since, all the big cities have them, but Representative Liebling.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So I just wanted to kind of make that point, that there's a lot more money going to this than meets the eye for tourism generally. And just secondly, to make the observation that, and I checked this with Ms. Dalton as well, but I don't think there's any other industry in the state for which we use public funding for advertising. And that's what I'm understanding this to be. I mean, not that it's a bad thing, but we are collecting taxes to use to promote an industry. And certainly we can argue that that industry is our whole state and promotes the whole state, and that's fine. But I just do think that that's worth mentioning while we're talking about this whole topic. Thirdly, I just want to say I'm not really a big fan of dedicated taxes, and I know they do have their use, but it seems to me that when we dedicate taxes, we basically tie our hands, and we've done that in a lot of instances that I think later on people have looked at and said, oh my gosh, really too bad we did this. And, case in point is the legacy amendment, which is a great thing. I'm in no way complaining that we have that money coming in for a lot of great stuff. But then when we have deficits in other areas, we're kind of, tied to spending a bunch of money in this big pool. And, I do think that can be a problem. And by the way, I didn't vote for that. So, I guess I'm okay criticizing it. But I just think that's something to think about when we go and dedicate a pot of money to a certain cause. It really does tie our hands.
Although, Madam Chair, to that
Yes,
point,
Representative
Representative
Atkins,
Liebling, the one key difference that you didn't distinguish is that this one, for every dollar you put in, you have an $8 return on that investment. So many of our other expenditures are costs that don't bring in any additional local or state tax revenue. And we've got proof, and we'd be happy to share it with the committee, that in fact you put $1 in, you got about an $8 ROI. That's the key difference.
Representative Liebling.
Well, thanks, Madam Chair. And Representative Atkins, I heard what you said on that, and I get that you think that this is a really good place to spend money. And I would argue that that's a good reason to make that argument to the legislature that we should appropriate that money in any given budget. But I don't know if that is a good reason to dedicate funding from a certain source going forward year after year after year.
Well, and I don't want to belabor it, Madam Chair, but the point is that when you put $1 in and you get $8 back, you can spend those $8 on something else. And that's the chief difference between something that's got a return on investment as opposed to simply a cost that's being incurred by state government.
Okay, Representative Anderson, and then Drazkowski. Representative Anderson.
I'll pass.
Okay, Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a comment, Representative Atkins, if it's $1 and $8 return, I heard there's a $15 return on education, there's a $7 return on this one, and then there's a $7 return on something else. We shouldn't stop at $15.2 million. We should be investing $2-3 billion if it's going to return that well.
No, Madam
We'd be able to work ourselves right out of the deficit and just by applying ink to a paper.
Yeah, actually,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Drazkowski, that would be stupid. And it would be stupid because at some point there would be a diminishing, you're familiar with how economics works, at some point there'd be a diminishing amount of returns. And the key is to try to figure out what is that point at which you get the maximum amount of return. And I know it was a stupid question, but I'm trying to give it an intelligent answer, is that at some point you're going to reach a spot where you can't, the amount of return on the investment no longer justifies the investment. And that's why it makes sense to invest at this level. At the point where you have the diminishing returns, that would be the point at which to stop spending.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Atkins, I'm very familiar with the concept of diminishing marginal returns, but the assertion continues to be made, and I think it rings hollow given the fact that we don't have any proof that these things make these returns, any solid proof. On top of that, there's modeling, et cetera, and I've seen some of that. But if the idea that government spends money in all these areas is going to provide all these returns, why aren't we seeing it in our economy? Why aren't we seeing it in the state budget? Why aren't we seeing Minnesota employed?
Actually, Madam
It's
Chair.
an empty argument. So I apologize, Representative Atkins. I didn't mean it to be a question, just intended really for it to be an assertion and something for us to think about. Thank you.
Well, Madam Chair, to that
Atkins,
point,
yes.
but we do have proof, and we'd be happy to supply it to the committee. The 8-to-1 return on investment isn't something I just pulled out of thin air. We'd be happy to provide that to members of the committee.
Further? Representative, I think that's it. Is there someone else who had their hand up? If, for the public who may not know this, Representative Drazkowski and Representative Atkins actually like each other. That may be lost on the public, but they are expert at giving each other a hard time, and we've seen that many times, and I think it should just be pointed out that I don't think there was any disrespect meant by either, correct? Yes, yes. Okay, so further questions? Thank you, and thank you all for being here. And we're going to lay over House File 712 as amended for possible inclusion in the omnibus tax bill. Thank you, Representative.
And Representative Drazkowski. Thank you.
Representative Norton is here. We're going to jump to Representative Norton. She's coming from one bill and going to another. And this is the mail proposal again, members. We've posted this on the agenda for a couple weeks. That we are not debating the bill now. We are simply assisting this proposal while some of us continue to have reservations. We're assisting this proposal and making it to deadlines here. Representative Hausman would like to hear the bonding provisions. And of course, this committee can't do the bonding provisions, and the Capital Investment Committee can't do the tax provisions. So we have an amendment in our packets that I'm going to move. And I did ask Representative Norton to share it with the mail, and we'll take her comment, but I also want to ask Mr. Michael to explain the amendment for everybody in the committee. And so I'll move House File 409, be off the table before us again, and then I'm going to move the amendment as well for consideration, and I don't know the number of the amendment. So I'll move the 80409A12. And the motion would be to pass the rest of the bill to the Capital Investment Committee. So, Mr. Michael, if you can explain the amendment.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, what the amendment does is it deletes a number of provisions of the bill that relate either directly or indirectly to tax committee jurisdiction. Section 1 is the property tax exemption for economic development properties. Sections 2 and 3 are the special tax increment rules. At section 2, 3, and 4 are the tax increment rules. And then the value capture provisions, which you'll recall there's the certification mechanism in the bill that has the authority certifying to the state that there are increases in collections of designated state taxes. Those provisions are dropped, and instead alternative reporting and plain vanilla appropriation bonding provisions with a blank appropriation rather than a dollar amount appropriation, since that'll need to be determined later, are in the bill. Are taken, essentially put in the bill, and to replace the value capture certification formula model that was in the bill before.
Okay, so Representative Norton, comments or questions of Mr. Michael for further clarification for your supporters here, so folks know what's going on. Representative Norton.
Well, Madam Chair, I think we were very comfortable with the value recapture, and we know this particular committee wasn't as thrilled with that. And so, knowing that we still have a lot of work to do yet in the tax committee, I think this amendment will at least allow the bill to move forward to the Capital Investment Committee so that Representative Hausman and her committee can understand the implications in their under their jurisdiction. So I think with that, those comments, I think we're comfortable with moving that particular portion and look forward to our opportunity next week to have a further and more robust discussion about what's left in the bill and how we might move ahead.
Thank you, Representative Norton, and we'll take questions from members in just a second. And I will just say, members, my intention here, and I want to thank Representative Norton and her team of people. They have been working with me, and I've been working with them. It's not always easy, and I know they've all been talking with all of you as well. But the tax committee will decide any tax expenditures or tax preference or tax carve-outs or tax exemptions or any kind of tax activity as it relates to this proposal. And it is my intention to try to put something together. I think people widely misunderstand some of the objections people have. I hope that people don't think that the tax committee as a group is not intending to try to do something here. But we're asking for information so we can be problem solvers, not having a prescription provided to us. And that's a give and take bipartisanly for everyone in this room. So I think some people think that this motion is to kill this proposal, and it is not. This is to keep it alive. So members, let's be clear here. If you want the Mayo proposal to stay alive this session, you want to vote now to continue it on to bonding. So I do intend to have some provisions, if I can get the votes in this room, for the Mayo proposal in the omnibus tax bill. So I just don't want to put that on, I want to put that on the record for everyone, that this is not the last word here. This bill has been scheduled next week for the tax committee to continue to hear the tax provisions as it relates to destination medical center. I'm not sure always what to call it. But questions on the amendment before us and the process here. Representative Davis.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And just a couple of questions here. First of all, it would just the route here would go to bonding. If it's found favorable there, does the bonding portion come back, or would that have to stay in bonding? Because there's some question if there's even going to be a bonding bill this year. So what would the intentions be? Would the bonding financing provisions come back to taxes to move through the tax committee?
Representative Davids, no, I don't think the tax committee can do bonding.
Madam Chair, we're the tax committee. We can do whatever we'd like.
Well, we could give that a try. I think you all have bonding bills that you could offer as amendments to the omnibus tax bill and see how that goes. But then everyone knows the tax bill would take 81 votes on the House floor. And,
Madam Chair, is that correct for appropriation bonds?
Appropriation bonds, no. That's a 68 vote, so.
Okay.
Okay. But, my intention wouldn't be, like all the bills that we're moving along, the tax committee, once we've heard it, we can take any of those bills and put it in the omnibus tax bill. We can change them, and that's why I'm trying to signal my intention is to work with Representative Norton and her team and Representative Liebling and all other legislators bipartisanly who are working on this to try to find some package that would come out of the House Tax Committee. So, but we wouldn't ask for the bonding provision to come back.
And thank you, Madam Chair. And I would like to disagree with my good friend from Rochester, Representative Norton, just a bit when she said that the tax committee wasn't thrilled with some of the original provisions. I disagree. There were many of us on this committee that were thrilled with the provisions as is. This bill has been sitting in this committee for 3 weeks to the day right now. But I would like to thank Governor Dayton for seeing that this is a very extremely important bill and a high priority by assigning Tina Smith to work on this with the legislature. Of course, I've been very public that I'd like to see this as a standalone bill. This is an extremely important bill that I think has the merit to go forward on its own, but I certainly do respect the wishes of the chair to get going here, and I will certainly want to support this amendment at this time and defer to the judgment of Representative Norton, who believes this is the best way to go at this time. So I'll certainly be supporting this amendment at this time, but I'm very concerned with less than 2 months left. This is a big deal that we really need to get going, and I'm glad, Madam Chair, that you have it scheduled for next week on the tax provisions, and I also have the great fortune to sit on the bonding committee, and so we'll be working on those issues there. So a very, very important bill for this state, not just Rochester, not just southeastern Minnesota, but for the entire state of Minnesota. So I'm going to follow the lead of Representative Norton here to get this thing moving and see what we can put together. So I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Further discussion on the amendment or questions? Representative Drazkowski. Yes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering, maybe Ms. Dalton, I'm wondering if this amendment's drafted properly. On line 1.7 of the amendment, it talks about a subdivision 18, or 1.6, page 18, a subdivision 18, and I can't find that, so I don't know if
Mr. Michael?
Madam Chair, Representative Drazkowski, the problem is that the bills that were put in the folder are the bills as introduced, and the amendment is drawn to the first engrossment, which is the bill that the committee actually has.
Okay.
And so that's why the page and lines don't match up.
And Representative Drazkowski, we apologize about that.
Not a problem. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Michael.
Okay, further questions, comments? Representative Schoen, please.
So on, Madam Chair, on process, and I'll excuse my simplicity in not understanding the entire process as this relates to, but maybe I don't share Representative David's excitement for the bill quite yet. And I'm just, to clarify the process, what exactly are we doing here today? I mean, I'm not showing my complete endorsement for the bill as is. This is simply the amendment and moving it on because of the amendment to another committee. I guess I want to make clear that my positive vote here isn't a positive support for the bill as it stands today.
Madam Chair, it's a vote on the bill.
For the public, everything is a vote on the bill. And all procedural motions tend to be a vote on a bill this year. But I think the way to think about it is House File 409 has been here. This committee, has had possession of it now. And for the bonding folks to take a look at it, it's got to make it on its way. We're holding the tax provisions there because we certainly wouldn't allow the Capital Investment Committee, and I think Representative Davids would agree with this, to write tax policy. So we would like to be the folks who are in charge of that. Of course, people know that for the bill to move forward, it's going to take revenue, and this is the Revenue Committee who's got to find the revenue for the bill to move forward. And so Representative Norton has been fighting vigorously for this proposal and for her community, and we want to see if we can have a broader conversation about how we can move things forward. And I just don't think everybody's quite there. But I appreciate, people thinking it through. But so, you could carry this bill, all as one, as a standalone, as Representative Davids has mentioned, to think about it. And, that happens occasionally here, like a stadium. Generally, that doesn't happen. And it's kind of a unique way to think about this bill this year that, for the 14 years I've been here, everyone has tried to figure out how to not be in the tax bill. That is the goal, to not be in the tax bill, because it's always been a divided government where one side puts their bill up and the other side vetoes it. This is the year, folks. If you want something passed, you need to be in the tax bill. Now, this is a new way for people to think. And even the lobbyists and both parties have not understood this until the last few weeks. Everyone is starting to realize that one of the bills that has to be signed this year to pass the budget is the tax bill. Generally, that's the bill that's vetoed, no matter who's in charge. So most folks are figuring out that to stay alive in the final hours of session, you probably need to be in the tax bill. So you just have to think about it a little differently, and it's a different way for a freshman to hear all that. But normally, we all try to avoid the tax bill, Mr. Chair. I think you agree, because we know it's often the kiss of death. But this year, we will have a signed tax bill. So a little bit different take on that, Representative Jones. Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just while we're having this discussion, I wonder if I could bring up something that's related but a little bit different, and that is that a member of this committee, Representative Davids, had an interview with the Post-Bulletin recently, the editorial board, and he apparently, or they said in their editorial that he said that he had been working on this for, I think he said, several years. And I was curious about that because I only found out about this proposal, I think, last September. And so I'm really kind of curious if Representative Davids would tell us if he was really working on the DMC proposal for several years. And I'd just kind of like to know about that, because if that's true, I guess I'd like to know what work was done in the last couple of years.
Sure.
Representative Davids.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I've worked on it for 2 years, 2012 and 2013.
Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for sharing with the committee and the public your opinion on that. If you want a bill to pass, you put it in the omnibus tax bill this year. And let me just offer a contrarian viewpoint on that. This is basically, you're talking about a size and scope of a project here. It's like a Viking stadium. That's what it is. And if 2012, Speaker Zellers and Chairman Davids had tried to pass the Viking stadium by putting it in an omnibus tax bill, it wouldn't have happened. There's no chance of it, because it requires bipartisan support, required both sides of the aisle to support it, and there's going to be members of the minority and the majority who are both going to support and oppose this. And so I can tell you, though, if this bill, regardless of how it moves forward, Representative Norton, if this bill's in the omnibus tax bill that's got the income tax increases, the additional sales tax authority on the middle class, it's punishing hardworking taxpayers in this state, there ain't no way I'm going to vote for it. And I can tell you what, I'm not going to speak for all the other Republicans in the House of Representatives. I think you'd be hard-pressed, regardless of the benefits of this program, that if it's contained in the omnibus tax bill with all those controversial provisions, you're going to need 68 Democrat votes to pass it. And I just don't think you got it. So if your intention is on passing this bill, if you want it to become law, I think you are far better off trying to have this go standalone, where it's the only issue at hand. If you look at big projects that this legislature has done, it's been more successful going standalone if it needs bipartisan support. Again, if you think you can put together a plan that's tacked onto an income tax increase and you can just get Democrat votes, then you can do that. But diversification is a sound investment strategy and one that I would advise you to follow with regards to this bill. Thank you.
Further questions? And Representative Garofalo, I think, again, it's taking people a little while, I think, to think about this. And I heard what you said, but remember the tax bills in your majority, just when we were in the majority before, and then again, your Representative David's bills were vetoed. Okay, so that's the point I'm making here. We will have a signed tax bill this year.
Sure. May I talk? You got to say my name first. Is usually how it works.
I nod at people, but
okay. But but Madam Chair, the dynamics are right now. If you've got 6 members of the DFL caucus who are fiercely opposed to this program and don't support it, those 6 members can take down this bill if it's contained in the omnibus tax bill, because you ain't going to get a Republican vote to vote for the provisions that are bouncing around this place, whether it's a 4th tier or a 5th tier and the other income taxes. So if you have 6 DFL members who say they're against it, it takes it down. If it goes by itself, you've got a lot more breathing room with members on both sides of the aisle. And again, there's several controversial provisions in this bill, good and bad, supporters on both sides of the aisle. But I just don't, if I was looking to pass this bill, I don't know why on God's green earth I would attach it to an income tax increase. I don't know how that gains you votes.
Representative Garofalo, appreciate your thoughts on that. We are prepared to govern. I think you will see us pass a bill, and we'll put up 68 votes for our tax bill. And if you would all like to join us, we hope that would be great. But the governing majority has to put up 68 votes for their bills, and we intend to do that with every omnibus bill. So we appreciate that. Further questions? If not, Representative Davids.
Well, first of all, Madam Chair, I'd like to thank you for getting this moving. It's been sitting here for 3 weeks. And just to clear up the record, I did get a tax bill signed. And I had 2 others that should have been signed.
They were too hot.
Yeah, and I apologize. That's correct. I had 5 signed by Governor Plenty. None of them were the ones that, just like your big ones weren't signed. I mean, we understand how this works. So, I hear what Representative Garofalo is saying. There is nothing free. We all know this. And I have not heard bipartisan support for revenue to pay for this. So if folks are willing on this side of the aisle to explain what revenue they'll vote for to pay for this, I'm all ears. So until that time, I intend to put it in the tax bill, because I've not heard anybody come forward with revenue. So we're going to move this then, unless there are other questions, by a vote off to the Capital Investment Committee. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those say nay. The motion carries. Thank you, Representative Norton. Off to Capital Investment. We adopted the amendment, right? Yeah. I'm pretty.
I don't think we did.
As long as the minutes say that it doesn't matter what
And they get approved. So thank you. Representative McDonald. Oh, you know what? We're past 2. I'm so sorry. The next committee is coming in. Sorry, we are going to recess till 6 o'clock, and we'll continue with our bills. I'm sorry, the next committee is at 2:15. Representative McDonald, I apologize. You'll leave first. Thank you. With that, we're in recess.